So, always first question, you're in a room of farmers. First question is always, how are the crops? How are the crops down south? How are your walnut trees? How are things looking down south? That's always the first question.
So down south, I think we, like most places, I know in the north, the rain hasn't been as heavy. Uh, all I can tell you is my acre and a half lake would normally be about a foot and a half below the trickle tube. It's about 2 inches from,
Mm.
you know, needing to be used. So, I hear things like corn sweat. I never heard of tassel wrap.
We didn't know what those things were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do watch Egg Day. That's a show early in the morning. I record it. So I see a few of those each week. And farming is one of the most rewarding occupations, but the good Lord made it difficult as well, the weather being your business partner. So you live with it, but down south, we are in pretty good shape. The big rains didn't hit most of us. I think I dumped maybe an inch out of the rain gauge, and we had about three of those pop-up thunderstorms that gave us about what we needed.
Yep.
So we'll keep our fingers crossed through the rest of the growing season.
That's right. I love how you say that. Your weather's your business partner.
Yeah.
That's right. So, big week, big couple weeks here in Indiana. My team's heard me say it before, and the farmers have heard me say it. In Indiana, we punch above our weight, right? Let's start with USDA. Big announcement, getting USDA hub, one of them here in the state. What's your take on that? What can you share with us on that front?
Well, first of all, getting anything out of DC is going to certainly make it closer to the people that interface with those agencies. Not to mention, it would probably reduce the cost by 60, 70, 80%. So I love it. And I love the fact that we're one of the 5 states. So it's going to be a significant move. I think it's over half of the current employees are going to be closer to the people that they serve. And when you look at Indiana's juxtaposition with the federal government, a place I spent 6 years before becoming governor, they came in here or asked me as one of the few governors to come to DC to talk about education reform. We'll get to the topic here in a little bit about making America healthy again, making Indiana healthy again. They showcase that in our state when Kennedy and Oz came into town. And just yesterday, important to agriculture as well, will be energy. And then finally, hallelujah, we're going to get some relief from the EPA. I remember vividly the first year I was in the Senate, we had to dust up in our own home county where a local CO was literally running farmers down on the back 40 when they were doing ditch maintenance on ditches that hardly ever had any water in them. So that was a big disconnect between real regulation that might be practical and make sense to where government was way over the top. And that happened another time in a similar way. So that was a big deal yesterday. And of course, which state did they choose to showcase it in? Indiana. So that means we're going to have a good connection with them. We're not going to always agree 100%, but with stuff that makes common sense, I'm going to always be there wanting to lend a hand.
That's great. And we just appreciate your representation, given your background and your history and how you're able to elevate this. Congressman Baird is here. We were talking yesterday, it was a big day, a lot of fun there, sir. So thank you for being a part of that. Yesterday, you mentioned Administrator Zeldin. Talk to us some more about what is he laying out, how is he proposing, and how is that going to help get regulation out of the way and hopefully help some farmers across the state?
So it's already getting blowback from the places that think that we're not regulating enough, or we certainly shouldn't be using what is common sense. We're all for clean water, clean air, but when it gets taken to the point where the administration prior to this one was doing things that just did not make sense, doubling down on stuff that was hurting rather than helping. It means that it's not mutually exclusive to lighten certain regulations and still protect what farmers protect better than almost anyone is the land itself. I don't know of anyone here in this room that doesn't want to keep their soil on their farm, that have not embraced um, filter strips, riparian buffers. They know that if that you don't keep your soil healthy, it's not going to be good in the long run. But then when you have to adhere to some of the things that have been mandated to where you know it doesn't, it's not a win-win, this is where hopefully we lighten up on the crazy stuff and we make sure we still, like we've always been, good stewards of the land.
Director Lamb gave us a little bit state of agriculture a little bit earlier, and he said Indiana, I think, is 32, 33 in geographical size, but number 3 in cover crops. So to that point, it's the farmers of Indiana. We're punching above our weight. We're doing outsized work to protect our land and our water. Yeah, yeah.
And, on any of the federal programs that hopefully are going to be there as an incentive for us to leverage upon, I think you're going to see those staying in place. You're just going to, I think, see whenever government's growing faster than the economy, I don't care at whatever level it is. We had our own wrestling match on property taxes. And of course, agriculture disproportionately shoulders a burden there. It becomes where, even in places like our own school districts and our own local governments, we want them to be healthy. And we had that discussion as probably the key issue in this session that we just completed. So I think this is about proper balance, um, making sure when, like I said earlier, the difficulty of farming compared to what it was when I first got involved with it. I remember what it cost to put out an acre of soybeans or corn. I mean, look how much more expensive that is, the altitude in terms of operating lines and so forth. You just got to make sure you then don't overburden with stuff that doesn't need to be there because the marginal benefit isn't there. And I'm going to be attentive to that. And I mean, when I got out of the Senate and John Tester, the Democrat from Montana, a wheat farmer, we were the only two that had a real connection with agriculture on the Ag Committee in the Senate. So we'll never lose that closeness in state government because of what you said earlier. We punch way above our weight when it comes to the whole spectrum of agriculture.
And talking about balance, you mentioned it, make Indiana healthy again. That's a balanced approach. And it's not about, one of the things you said in your op-ed is that it's not about, you're not trying to regulate how farmers farm, but it's about balance and about making things accessible. So talk to us about that, because it scares people a little bit.
It does. And you get a high profile individual like RFK Jr. coming in. It can be scary because, again, that's DC descending upon the real world. And well, that's kind of the way I look at it simply. And you got to make sure you can push back when you need to. I was really pleased when I saw Farm Bureau in our own state get involved in healthcare. I mean, that was a blessing for farmers because you finally put the muscle together of all of our farmers that may need some help on health insurance. I remember 17 years ago when I tackled it in my own business. Lucky, it's only going up 5 to 10%. I said, I don't feel very lucky. I wrestled with the insurance company then. We were just large enough to self-insure. And when we were done that day, I think we cut costs by 60%. Became the insurance company. How many of you have not had a premium increase in the last 17 years? No one ever raises their hands or says yes. Actually able to do it and still in place. Yeah. So make America healthy again, make Indiana healthy again. Ounce of prevention's worth a pound to cure. And our healthcare system, monopolized by just a few insurance companies, fewer and fewer healthy hospitals, And where we need them most, everyone in this audience, in rural areas, they get weaker and weaker all the time. I'm going to try to turn that around. And we want to make sure that we're emphasizing in healthcare prevention and wellness, not expensive remediation. That's where the heart is in Make America Healthy Again. Now, talk to RFK. Do you know the impact we'd have if we got rid of Roundup? Well, he said, well, tell me more. I said, well, I know that there's, one company is, looking at what are we going to do? We're getting sued left and right. Farmers can't do without it. If you don't have a good, easy alternative, all of a sudden our yields go down. Then you got another crisis. I think there was that degree of then realism that set into that whole discussion. I mean, I think it's all clear that the more we can go from farm to uh, the market and have as little processed stuff in there, we're not going to get rid of all of it. It creates opportunities in the ag area where if you're wanting to take a different approach, you're going to adapt to the times ahead of us. I think it can be a win-win, but you run into some stuff where it's going to make production where most of farming is at currently, soybeans, corn, into the feed and food side of our food economy. You got to be careful that you don't get it too ahead of your skis. I'm going to understand it and we'll weigh in accordingly. But generally, in my own business, no revenue stream would remain healthy more than 7 to 10 years. I said, darn, now we got to find a new market. We got to find different ways of doing it. Well, it was a hallmark of what we've done in that business, which is trucking and warehousing for now into like its 44th or 5th year. I've been not directly tied to it over the last 7 years. We've grown the business. It's somewhere over 15% a year, but never relied on what was working in the past as a guarantee to take you into the future. So look at new ways of doing things. I think this opens up a ton of opportunities of farm to market, and you're still going to keep a lot of what's already in play because that's not going to go away.
Right, right. So I guess just pulling on that thread a little bit more, getting farmers closer to consumers, getting more transformation here in the state. We were talking about Ingredion, ADM, Tate & Lyle, Cargill, that processing in state. So talk to me about how this initiative for the folks in this room, you think it's going to directly impact and help some of the farmers around in this room.
So I think when you're looking at like taking dyes out of food, remember trans fats years ago, they're gone and it's for the good of it. It'll force even the largest to maybe pay attention to the marketplace, where trends are going. A lot of times this stuff is not affordable the way people want it, and that's where farmers always defy the predictions. They find ways of doing it, to where they keep the products they produce always competitive. You bring in issues like, food security. There's a lot of what goes into producing. And here, I think my advice would be is look at the opportunities there. Don't dwell on what might force you to do things a little differently. But if it comes to something as simple as this is, Roundup, if you're looking at messing with stuff like that, it's just not going to work because you'd be more disruptive than you would be adaptive to what the new opportunities are out there. And that's why it's going to take legislators. Jim's got the background, I do, and there are going to be enough of us that can weigh in and temper, even where you're with a friendly administration that loves farmers. There's another component to it. We all want to be healthier in the long run as well. I view it as an opportunity, and I don't think it's ever going to overwhelm the producers, the people that put the hard work in, because there are going to be plenty of us there that understand where to make the case you're pushing too hard.
Yeah. And you talk about seeing those opportunities. One of the things, and you and I have talked about it before, Indiana is unique that we're the number one producer of high oleic soybeans, the number one processor of high oleic soybeans in the entire world. And that's a heart healthy seed oil grown right here in India. It's another example that we're punching above our weight,
Yeah.
way above our weight. Grown, developed. Corteva's here in the room, one of our sponsors today, developed by Corteva, a big part of it. Bex has a line of it as well. Grown here, developed, and has delivered $150 million in premiums back to farmers. That's another heart healthy example of that. So as you're traveling the state and you're talking to producers, all over the state, you have some opportunity. You see opportunities. You are a visionary. You've seen it in your own business. You saw it in the Senate. You see it for the state. You have a vision for agriculture in the state. What do you see as the opportunities for agriculture in the state?
So I think when you're looking at what's going to probably make up the most of the markets, they're going to be very commodity based. I remember when I first got involved in a farming operation, and I was in charge of the hedge to arrive contracts. And I didn't know much about that, but I wasn't jumping on the tractor and doing any of that stuff, and got pretty good at it. And I remember too that we had a choice of doing white corn versus yellow corn, and that was a specialty product. They generally give you anywhere from 30 to maybe 50-cent premium. So that idea of doing specialty products that aren't on the commoditized side of it, that's a way to squeeze extra gross profit out of each acre where you're producing. So you're going to find that places like South America are probably not going to be as attuned into how to reach those markets. And anytime you can do something that's going to extract a premium where the market's willing to pay for it, that's another way to, I think, enhance your financial return over time. So that's a good example of it. There are many more.
And one of the things Director Lamb talked about was, again, Indiana's outsized in our ability to do identity preserved and specialty crops, but then that infrastructure piece, having container markets, having the opportunity to export that so that we can take advantage of those as well. I know you're passionate about transportation and infrastructure as well on that piece.
Yes, and I think part of my prep and review before that is that we're at a disadvantage to some neighboring states. And that is disappointing when we're the crossroads of America, and we should be the logistics king of that. So that gets into the difficult conversation of where do we need better infrastructure to eliminate that 15, 20, 25% differential, because that'll mean a lot. And infrastructure is why I came to the State House back in 15, 16, and 17. It was for roads and bridges, but waterways come into play for agriculture big time. So we need to understand all of it. And the most difficult thing about infrastructure is how do you pay for it? I remember back when we wrestled with how do we get roads and bridges in a better place? Well, number one, we took the sales tax on fuel and flipped every cent of it from just the one that was going to roads and bridges and made sure all the rest of it did. And over time, that's now the case. In many instances, in past governances in our state, you take road funding revenue and, peel it off for something else. That's not going to happen. And of course, we got a big discussion. What we did back in 16, we did community crossings, which made small towns healthier on their own roads and bridges. That doesn't help your more urban areas. But again, 48 out of 50 of the stakeholders, including Farm Bureau, were for raising diesel taxes by 10 cents and gas by 20. That was never an easy route to navigate. I distinctly remember in my next political engagement, they called me Tax Hike Mike because I was for doing what was a responsible thing in terms of if you're raising road revenues, make sure it's used on them. And when that's our comparative advantage as a state, we got to make sure our infrastructure is in good shape. And I think farmers have always been willing to do their share there as long as it's not going to be peeled off for other purposes.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I know we've got some of our friends from Connexus here as well, and those are some of the conversations we've been having as well of making sure agriculture's in those conversations because it's agriculture and manufacturing along with that. So anything else? I'll open it up. Anything else you want to touch on or anything else you want to share?
I think we didn't talk about energy much, but that is the issue on the horizon that wasn't there as recently as 3 years ago. I spent a lot of time in the Senate trying to take a conservative approach to counter a lot of the Green New Deal stuff, which is now fallen apart. It doesn't make sense when we got our biggest geopolitical foe that is trying to corner the renewables market, which, by the way, doesn't count towards any base load. I'm not against it. It's just that when the wind's not blowing, sun not shining, the grid gives it about 2 to 3%. And obviously that means we duplicate stuff. And now you've got AI, which is, I've never seen any new technology where the people that have created it said, hey, we want it regulated because this could be one of the most beneficial things that's ever hit um, human beings, or it could be used in a malicious way. So we know that others are going to try to corner that market, but what it's done is spiked the demand for energy, and we probably have not done a good enough job of, even before it came along, of making sure that our kilowatt costs haven't done what they've done, which meant that we were in the top 10 of all 50 states probably 20, 30 years ago. Now we're, not in the top 10. We're like 36 or 7. So I'll be paying attention to that as we try to construct what that new horizon will be. Indiana will be at the forefront of that again. Energy Secretary was here yesterday. Purdue is the one institution that's so far ahead of the curve when it comes to small modular reactors. It had its own there. So Indiana will be at the forefront of it. And then the goal is going to be to have adequate energy to make sure it's not robbing from households and other businesses unrelated to data centers. So it'll be tricky to navigate, feel comfortable doing it. And again, I think got a good relationship with DC so that they're going to listen along the way and not push things that are out of reach.
What I keep hearing you say, and I'm going to paraphrase you, sir, if I might, all things in moderation. We can do good and be good. We can grow businesses and protect things. We can have right sized in this. And Indiana is a state we can do it in because we just have those Hoosier values and that practical approach of taking care of businesses and taking care of each other and taking care of our neighbors.
At the news conference and the rollout yesterday at the Kenworth dealership, common sense was used probably more than any word. We're heavy on it. And I think that we're in a unique position currently of how we can, as a state government, get the best out of what might be coming from the federal government. They need to get their financial house in order, and that's been through Republican and Democrat administrations, where it's a bad business plan to think you can borrow money from future generations and that they're going to be in good shape from it. So I was the loudest voice on that in DC, kind of like talking to the side of my big barn back home. But here we have to live within our means. And then how do we take the resources that taxpayers give us and get the best return on investment? And always getting understated in our own economy is what agriculture does. We're the biggest manufacturing state per capita, and sadly, healthcare is now probably the largest part of our economy. It needs to be downsized by roughly 50% to bring it in line with what the rest of the world does. And then you've always got agriculture toughing it out in a place that always seems to do things better, never quite having that stability it needs because it's still at the mercy of the weather and purely open markets on how the product is priced. So I think the more you get into areas where you can extract that premium for whatever you're doing in a specialty way, or you eliminate middlemen in doing it, That's how you enhance your own fortunes into the future. And that's what I'll try to help do as governor.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, sir. We've got, I think, time for a couple of questions here. Well, we've got this great audience. So questions from the room in the back.
You're welcome.
The question I'm thinking through is we as the American farming producers make up such a small percent of our national population. What I would like to hear from your standpoint, what do we need to do to get our concerns to Indiana as well as federally, so that we continue to be heard and can be the force that still holds America together?
So the numbers have decreased, but I was on the Ag Committee all 6 years in the Senate, and it was the least partisan of any of the committees. So you have a disproportionate impact even there, but sadly, there were only two of us on the committee that knew much about farming. Now we're both gone. So you'll still have that representation there. I think they know the importance of food. When it's not going to be secure and affordable, then of course everybody would be complaining. In our own state, I think that we are understated as well in terms of what all we have to bring to the table. As long as I'm here as governor, I'm going to understand the concerns. I did probably more field visits as a senator into buildings like this. This is nicely air conditioned on the hottest day of the year, so I'm appreciative of that. But just bring it to me. Between Katrina Hall, when I was in the State House, it was like E.F. Hutton. When she talks, everybody's listening. I think you're well represented there. Randy Crone from down in my neck of the woods, we've got a good relationship. I've campaigned as being the most accessible governor you're going to ever have. And you complain if that's not the case. I do tons of this. I visit all 92 counties every year. Almost anyone can schedule an appointment. Well, anyone can if you schedule it ahead, when I'm generally in my hometown of Jasper. I want to hear the ideas. I understand your business. And even though you don't represent as many people in it, you know what the definition is that no other industry owns productivity. And what you also gave us is when kids moved off the farm, they were the ones from World War II that kept our factories running. You know, they didn't need the education now that we got to make sure we're getting through workforce development to make sure we have enough of those real skills that your own businesses need, and especially our industries do in our own economy. So I think as long as you know that you've got always an attentive ear in state government, we'll do our share. And then the special relationship of taking those 420 plane trips I did over 6 years, you can see how that's putting Indiana in the catbird seat on any issue that's going to be federal in nature.
Yep. And just to piggyback on that, you mentioned Randy, Katrina, corn, soybeans. We've got Becky here. We've got pork. All of us in the barnyard, Indiana corn, Indiana soybeans, Farm Bureau, pork, poultry, dairy. We all just work so well together. I think that's a different thing we can do here in Indiana. So with that, Governor, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everything you're doing for the state of Indiana. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Yeah.